On February 12, 2010, the Whistler Sliding Center in Vancouver was preparing for the Winter Olympics. The track had earned a reputation as the fastest in the world, a winding ice chute where athletes could reach speeds approaching 100 miles per hour. Among those preparing was Nodar Kumaritashvili, a 21-year-old luger from Georgia making his Olympic debut. It was just hours before the opening ceremony when Kumaritashvili began his practice run. The young athlete lay back on his sled, body just inches above the ice. As he entered the final turn, curve 16, his speed had reached nearly 90 miles per hour. In an instant, something went wrong. His sled climbed too high on the wall. When it came back down, Kumaritashvili lost control. The sled wobbled violently beneath him. He tried to correct with subtle shifts of his body weight, but at such extreme speed, even tiny adjustments had massive consequences. The Georgian was thrown from his sled entirely, launched into the air like a rag doll. For a split second, he was airborne, completely separated from his equipment. The wall of the track ended, and beyond it stood unpadded steel support poles. Kumaritashvili's body flew directly toward one of these poles. The impact was immediate and violent. His body struck the pole at full speed. The sound echoed through the facility, a sickening thud that silenced everyone present. His sled shattered on impact, pieces of equipment scattering across the ice. Medical staff rushed to the scene within seconds. They found Kumaritashvili unresponsive. Blood spread beneath him on the ice as paramedics began CPR. Despite their desperate efforts, the damage was too severe. The impact had caused massive trauma to his head and spinal column. Nodar Kumaritashvili was pronounced dead shortly after arriving at the hospital. The news spread throughout the Olympic Village as athletes were preparing for the opening ceremony. What should have been a celebration became a moment of collective mourning. Kumaritashvili died not from competition, but from a practice run on a track many had already warned was dangerously fast. On February 22, 1992, the slopes of Les Arcs Resort in Albertville, France, were busy with Olympic athletes finalizing their preparation. Nicolas Bochatay, a 27-year-old Swiss speed skier, was among them. He was set to compete in speed skiing, a demonstration event where athletes hurtle straight down a mountainside at speeds exceeding 125 miles per hour. That morning, Bochatay and two teammates decided to warm up on a practice slope close to the public. The conditions were perfect, crisp, clear, with excellent visibility and firm snow underfoot. They took turns descending, each run faster than the last. Around 10:30 a.m., Bochatay began what would be his final descent. He pushed off from the starting point, quickly gathering momentum. His skis cut cleanly through the snow as he accelerated down the steep gradient. Within seconds, he was moving at full competition speed. The Swiss skier approached a natural rise in the terrain, a small bump invisible until the last moment. When Bochatay hit the bump, physics took over. His body launched into the air, momentarily suspended above the snow. In that split second, he cleared the crest and saw what waited on the other side. A snow-grooming vehicle, known as a snowcat, was parked just beyond the rise, completely hidden from the approach side. Bochatay had no time to react. His body slammed chest first into the solid metal machine at full speed. The impact was deadly. The force tore through his protective gear and drove directly into his chest cavity. His heart ruptured instantly from the trauma. His teammates, following the same path moments later, had no idea what had happened. They skied past the scene, initially unaware of the tragedy. By the time ski patrol reached Bochatay, he showed no signs of life. Medical personnel attempted resuscitation, but the internal damage was too severe. Nicolas Bochatay was pronounced dead at the scene. His Olympic dreams ended by a tragic confluence of speed, timing, and an unseen obstacle. His death sent immediate shockwaves through the Olympic community in Albertville. On January 25, 1964, the steep slopes of Patrickhofen Mountain loomed over Innsbruck, Austria, just days before the Winter Olympics would officially begin. Ross Milne, a 19-year-old Australian skier with a shock of blonde hair and an easy smile, was on the course for a training run. As one of the youngest competitors at the Games, he represented Australia's emerging winter sports program. The Patrickhofen downhill course was notorious among veterans, a brutal descent with sharp turns. sudden drops and narrow passages between trees. That morning, conditions were particularly treacherous. Overnight temperatures had dropped sharply, transforming sections of the course into sheets of ice beneath a thin layer of fresh snow. At approximately 11:15 a.m., Milne pushed off from the starting gate. Skis quickly found speed on the steep initial pitch. The young Australian navigated the first series of turns with promising form, his body low and compact against the rushing air. As he approached the middle section of the course, he was traveling at nearly 60 miles per hour. Without warning, Milne's right ski caught an icy patch hidden beneath the snow. The sudden loss of edge control sent him into an immediate skid. He fought to regain his line, but physics and momentum had taken over. His body veered sharply toward the edge of the course, where a line of pine trees stood just beyond the marked boundary. Witnesses reported seeing Milne desperately trying to self-arrest, digging his edges into the snow to slow his trajectory. It wasn't enough. At full speed, he crashed through the minimal course markings and collided directly with a solid pine tree. The impact was instantaneous and violent. The sound of the collision brought course workers running. They found Milne unresponsive, his equipment scattered across the snow. Despite immediate medical attention, the damage was irreversible. The force of hitting the tree had caused severe head trauma and internal injuries. Ross Milne was pronounced dead before reaching the hospital. The news stunned the Olympic Village. The Games hadn't even officially begun, yet they had already claimed their first victim. On January 27, 1964, the Winter Olympics in Innsbruck. Austria was about to make history with the first ever Olympic luge competition. Among those preparing was Kazimierz Kay-Skrzypeski, a 43-year-old British Royal Air Force pilot who had taken up the sport relatively late in life. His presence on the British team represented the growing international interest in this dangerous sliding sport. The newly constructed luge track at Eigels was a steep, twisting ice chute carved into the mountainside. That morning, Kay-Skrzypeski had already completed one troubling practice run. Witnesses reported that he had briefly lost consciousness after hitting his head during that descent. But after a medical check, he insisted on making another attempt. At 10:45 a.m., Kay-Skrzypeski positioned himself on his sled at the starting gate. He lay back, feet forward, head just inches from the ice. With a push-off, he began accelerating down the track. The sled quickly gathered speed on the steep initial section, reaching nearly 65 miles per hour as he entered the most technical portion of the course. What happened next occurred in mere seconds. As he navigated a particularly challenging curve, his sled began to drift sideways. Luge offers minimal steering control, just subtle shifts of body weight and pressure from the calves. Whatever correction Kay-Skrzypeski attempted failed. The sled slid up the banked wall and then violently dropped back to the track's surface. The impact ejected him from the sled entirely. His body tumbled across the ice before slamming headfirst into the solid ice wall at full speed. Course workers heard the impact and rushed to the scene. They found Kay-Skrzypeski unconscious and bleeding heavily from head wounds. Medical staff stabilized him at the track and rushed him to the hospital. Surgeons discovered he had suffered a fractured skull and massive internal bleeding. Despite emergency surgery that lasted hours, the trauma was too severe. Kazimierz Kay-Skrzypeski died the following day without regaining consciousness. His death, coming just 2 days after Ross Milne's fatal skiing accident on the same mountain, cast a somber shadow over the Games before they had even officially begun. On March 17, 2025, the Uludağ ski resort in Turkey was unusually quiet. The winter season was winding down, and the Grand Alpine Hotel had officially closed to guests the previous week. Still, a skeleton crew of staff remained on site, along with a few special guests. Among them was Berkin Usta, 24-year-old Olympic skier who had represented Turkey in the previous Winter Games, and his father Yaya, who had always supported his son's athletic career. The father and son had been granted permission to stay at the hotel while Berkin trained on the nearby slopes. Their room was on the 3rd floor, offering panoramic views of the mountains that had become Berkin's second home. At approximately 4:30 a.m., while most occupants were asleep, something sparked in the hotel's electrical system. The fire began in a utility room on the ground floor. Security footage later showed that within minutes, flames had engulfed the room and spread to the hotel's dated wooden interior. The smoke detection system, which should have triggered alarms throughout the building, failed to activate. The blaze spread upward through the central stairwell, creating a chimney effect that rapidly filled the upper floors with thick black smoke. By the time a night watchman discovered the fire and manually triggered the alarm, flames had already blocked the main exit routes. Guests and staff awakened to the sound of alarms and the acrid smell of smoke seeping under their doors. The Ustas, located on the third floor, faced a hallway already filled with blinding smoke. Hotel staff reported later that they heard shouts and movement from the third floor. Berkin and his father had attempted to navigate the smoke-filled corridor toward the emergency exit. Firefighters arrived within 12 minutes of the first alarm, but the building's remote location and the fire's intensity made immediate entry impossible. When rescue teams finally breached the third floor 2 hours later, they found Berkin and Yaya in the hallway, just meters from the emergency stairs. Both had succumbed to smoke inhalation. Berkin was found positioned over his father, apparently trying to shield him from the heat and smoke in their final moments. On December 23, 2024, the Swiss Alps were experiencing one of the most dangerous early winter conditions in years. Heavy snowfall, followed by warming temperatures, had created an unstable snowpack across much of the region. At the Arosa ski resort, officials had closed numerous off-piste areas and posted clear avalanche warnings at lift stations and trail markers. Among those at the resort that day was Julie Hediger, a 26-year-old snowboard cross competitor who had represented Switzerland in the Beijing Winter Olympics. Despite her professional status and intimate knowledge of mountain safety, Hediger made a decision that would prove fatal. Shortly after 11 a.m., she and a male companion were seen ducking under the closure ropes on the resort's eastern face. They ignored multiple warning signs, indicating extreme avalanche danger. The slope they entered featured untracked powder, a temptation too strong for the Olympic athlete looking for pristine conditions. Witnesses at a nearby chairlift watched as the pair traversed horizontally across the closed area. Hediger led the way, making wide, sweeping turns down the virgin snow. For approximately 2 minutes, everything appeared normal. Then, without warning, a fracture line appeared on the slope above them. The entire snow surface began to move as one cohesive sheet. The wall of snow, over 2 meters thick in places, accelerated toward them at frightening speed. Hediger's companion was at the slope's edge and managed to grab onto a small stand of trees. Hediger was in the center of the open face with nowhere to go. The wave of snow struck her from behind, instantly knocking her off her feet. Within seconds, she disappeared beneath the churning white mass. The slide continued downhill, carrying her buried body nearly 400 meters, before depositing tons of compacted snow into a natural terrain trap. Her companion, though traumatized, was able to call emergency services immediately. Rescue teams arrived with avalanche dogs within 20 minutes, but it was already too late. When they finally located Julie Hediger beneath 3 meters of dense snow, she showed no vital signs. The autopsy later confirmed she had died from asphyxiation while trapped beneath the snow, her lungs unable to expand against the crushing pressure. The Swiss Olympic Committee noted the bitter irony: a world-class athlete defeated not by competition, but by nature's raw power on the very terrain she had spent her life mastering. On February 25, 1988, the men's giant slalom event at the Calgary Winter Olympics was in full swing. Between competition runs, the course at Nikiska Ski Resort buzzed with activity as officials, coaches, and support staff prepared for the next round of athletes. Among those moving about the slopes was Dr. Jörg Oberhammer, a 47-year-old physician for the Austrian ski team, known for his dedication to athlete care. The morning had been hectic, with Oberhammer checking on several Austrian competitors between their first and second runs. Around 11:30 a.m., he was traversing a service road that crossed a section of the mountain where maintenance crews were working. Course workers later reported seeing him moving quickly on skis, focused on reaching another area where an Austrian skier was preparing. What happened next unfolded in mere seconds. As Oberhammer crossed an intersection of service roads, another skier, a course official, emerged from a blind spot. Neither had time to react. The two collided with significant force, the impact knocking both off their feet. While the other skier landed safely in soft snow, the collision sent Oberhammer tumbling directly into a restricted maintenance area. He slid across the hard-packed snow, disoriented and unable to stop his momentum. Just beyond where spectators or competitors were allowed stood a massive snow-grooming machine. The operator, focused on leveling a section of snow, had his back turned to the commotion and was unaware of the unfolding tragedy.